The year following that dictionary's publication, the definition, at least in New Hampshire, was enlarged by the addition of Linda Stewart Dalianis to the Superior Court bench. The makeup of the New Hampshire judiciary was changed to include the female gender that had previously been excluded for all of its history. The long career that followed has been remarkable. Judge Dalianis has presided over trials, administered sweeping administrative changes, dodged dinner rolls at Nashua bar events, written landmark decisions, and carried a pretty good tune. There are requirements and expectations in every job. She had added to that the weight of accomplishing what no one ever had before in the state of New Hampshire: the integration of the New Hampshire judicial system on all levels. She was the first. She blazed a new trail for women in New Hampshire.
I think it was around 1980. She was quite young, and Judge Gallen nominated her, as I recall, after she had served a relatively brief time as the first female marital master. There wasn't any rejection of her appointment. I think it was received well generally, but somewhat gingerly. Everybody wanted to see it was a different facet of her life, a different phase, moving to the Superior Court, and how she would handle it, and how she would be received by the lawyers who appeared in front of her, and frankly by the judges who were serving with her.
For hundreds of years, it was thought that women could not be lawyers because their sensitive, delicate constitution didn't allow them to be part of the rough and tumble. But Linda, Chief Justice Dalianis, conveyed a decisiveness. My perception was that new male lawyers, young male lawyers, were assumed to be competent unless they proved themselves incompetent. For women, it was really reversed. There were questions about competence, and so every day, every court appearance, every interaction with a client required proof of competence.
Those who break a judicial glass ceiling find themselves staring down the edge of a precipitous glass cliff. Every act will be watched, every order will be scrutinized, every trial will be under a microscope until there is acceptance of whatever is different about the new judge. Judge Dalianis understood this from the beginning of her long tenure on the Superior Court bench. She knew that her performance was the gateway for other female lawyers to join the judiciary after her. The pressure was formidable.
I know in the 1970s, when she first passed the bar, I mean, this was a very unusual time. We know the stories of Sandra Day O'Connor, number 2 in her class at Stanford Law School, having to be a secretary for the first few years because she couldn't find a job. And I'm sure that had some effect on Judge Dalianis. I'm sure it did, because no one in that time period, a woman in law school, could not have it. And it was always the responsibility of that woman to be better. They had to be outstanding in a lot of ways, and she clearly was.
She always took the work seriously, and I think in her own way she was never going to give anybody a shot at her because she either wasn't prepared or came in late or left early. She always put her time in.
Years later, when I went on the Superior Court, I understood from her example that I had to be prepared to do the hard work.
As a matter of fact, the worst loss I ever had was with her as a judge, no jury. And I mean, I really thought I was going to win. I lost. I read her decision, and I had to tell my client, I really don't think this is an appealable issue.
Glass ceilings are not, however, shattered that easily. A local politician called the nominee to say, "There's a rumor that you're going to have a baby. Do you plan to leave the bench after being confirmed? It is safe to assume that no male nominee has ever had to face the same question. Linda Dalianis' answer, paraphrased here, was, "It's not a rumor. I have other children as well, and I've never missed a day of work because of it." Linda Stewart Dalianis was confirmed as the first female Superior Court judge in the history of the state of New Hampshire in 1980.
Chief Justice Dalianis raised a family while she was a marital master and a Superior Court judge. That is a very daunting proposition, to raise small children and do this job at the same time. She showed you can do it all. And that's, even today, that's very difficult for young women lawyers who aspire to the bench and still have young children.
Took her work seriously, and she took her friendships with us seriously, but her preparation was legendary, and she was not at all what anybody would call precious. She was the real McCoy, the real person, and a joy to be with.
She made a speech at some legal function, and when it was over, I overheard her telling someone, "Well, I need to leave now because I've got to bring my young sons to the shoe store because they need new shoes for the school year." And that image stays in my mind, that she was leaving a legal function because her next chore was as mother.
A legacy is essentially defined as a gift. What is Judge Dalianis' gift to the people of New Hampshire? It is change. Justice in New Hampshire was made by males only before Judge Dalianis ascended to the Superior Court bench in 1980. It is now, less than 40 years later, dispensed by both genders. Perhaps more remarkable, however, is how the change has happened. It happened seamlessly and without much of anyone really noticing. New lawyers are sworn in before a Supreme Court that is 40% female and assume that this is the way it has always been. It was not, but they think so because of the smooth, tranquil, unassuming, and humble way this historic feat was accomplished. It is, after all, the New Hampshire way.
Looking around the room, I see so many familiar faces, friends, colleagues, and yes, even a few old adversaries. But even after all of these years, we are still united by one goal: equal justice for all.
I often hear the question of how Chief Justice Dalianis and other women paved the way for younger lawyers. It wasn't just a question of observing how she did the job. It was a question of observing someone who I respected immensely doing the job effectively.
So her legacy, she was the first. I'm surprised she doesn't have a perpetual headache for all the glass ceilings that she broke as marital master, Superior Court, first Chief Justice of the Superior Court, just long enough for a cup of coffee before the Supreme Court came along.
She set the standard in any court she was in, and that was to be there on time, to start on time, to get your decisions out, to treat the staff of the court appropriately. She has always kept a role of hard work, of being understanding the judicial system, understanding her role, and wanting to make the whole system better around that. Justice in New Hampshire is much better off because Linda Dalianis was a major part of it.
Linda S. Dalianis became the first female Supreme Court justice in the history of the state of New Hampshire in the year 2000. A woman's perspective, representative of all citizens, now completes the process by which we arrive at fairness in the courts of the state of New Hampshire. This is the legacy of Linda Stewart Dalianis, lawyer, judge, colleague, and friend.
first day on the Supreme Court, I'm sitting there, and Judge Dalianis is sitting right next to me. She's my seatmate of the 5. And at the conclusion of the first case, I said thank you to the arguing lawyer. She reached over to me and said, "The Chief Justice says thank you." I said, "Okay." Then at the conclusion of the second argument, I said, "Thank you. I've been doing this for 10 years. After every argument, you say thank you. 10 years of this." So I did it. To make a long story short, for the next 2 arguments, after every lawyer argued, I said thank you. And she would reach over and say, "The Chief Justice says thank you." After the third case, the next time I said thank you, she reached over to me and said, "Do you freaking speak English?"